Let's go right to our NBC News Pentagon correspondent, Courtney Kube. Courtney, good evening. On the president's social media post, he says that the United States bombed these 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including a full payload of bombs dropped on the primary site. That would, Courtney, imply, at least for all practical purposes, that in order to successfully bomb that site, the United States would have used those buster bombs that have yet to be utilized on these on B-2 bombers.
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of detail at this point. Here's a couple things that I would take away from the president's Truth Social. Number one, he said we have completed are very successful. That to me would indicate that this was sort of the bombers went in, or the potentially other aircraft, most likely other aircraft as well, went in here, they conducted this bombing run, and they got out. They've cleared Iranian airspace. That's generally the point at which military officials or the White House, I guess, would release any kind of information once they are clear of that potentially dangerous airspace over Iran. What we don't know is exactly what was used here. So if we look at some of the factors that we've seen today, we know that some B-2 bombers, a handful of them took off from Whiteman Air Force Base over Missouri. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. That is enough time for them to get to Iran. They have the ability, Jose, to fly extremely long distances. We're talking like 3-day missions, refueling in the air, never actually touching ground. Again, we don't have confirmation that was what was used here, but we have been talking all week about how difficult it would be to actually bomb Fordow. The actual facility sits somewhere in the neighborhood of about 300 feet below the surface of the earth, and it's underneath reinforced concrete. Now, the U.S. has these bunker busters you mentioned. They're technically called a massive ordnance penetrator. And what they are, these huge, really heavy bombs. They're only about 5,000 or 6,000 pounds of total explosives, but they're about 30,000 pounds in total payload, meaning that the majority of that weight is coming from these really heavy, strong, basically outer casings that have the ability to penetrate deep into the earth about 200 feet down before detonating. Jose, if they really wanted to take out Fordow, it would take a number of these MOPs, or these bunker busters, to just continue to pound at that concrete until they're able to fully break through it. Again, we don't know that that was used, but it makes the most sense. And as we've been saying, it's one of the capabilities that Israel simply does not have. They don't have bombs of this size, and they don't have the aircraft, the B-2, that are able to actually deploy them. One thing I was surprised about this was that the U.S. hit 3 different sites, as we heard from the president here tonight, not just at Fordow that we've been talking about. They also hit Natanz. Israel has already been striking Natanz over the last week plus now, and they also hit Esfahan. Now, the next big question is, well, several questions. One, is the U.S. going to continue? Is this a one and done? Based on the president's statement, he said completed. We'll take that for now as to be this mission right now is completed for the United States. The next question, will Iran respond, and how? The biggest concern all along is that Iran, or more likely Iranian proxies, would go after U.S. installations and assets in the region. There's a lot of them right within very close striking distance of Iran. But one thing that the U.S. has going for them, and this is number one, they've started getting some Americans out of there. They've started moving some assets around to get them out of harm's way. But also, in the last 9 days or so, Israel has really taken out a lot of Iran's conventional capabilities as well, not just going after their nuclear sites. So we're talking about their radars, their launchers, and even some of their ballistic missiles. The third big concern here is when you're hitting a nuclear site, or 3 of them, is there potential for radioactive material to spill into the ground, to spill into the atmosphere? Jose? I am far from an expert on nuclear material and radioactive material, but I have been reaching out to people who are experts on this. They say that the risk of that at Fordow is expected to be relatively low. James Acton, who's an expert on these sorts of issues, says that the material there is very low in radioactivity anyway at Fordow. And so the risk of it spilling into the atmosphere is low. The same with Natanz. We also heard from the IAEA this week after those first strikes on Natanz. They said there is very very little indication of anything getting out. The big concern here is if they were to hit Bushehr. That's at one of the facilities where there could be some sort of a fallout of radioactive material.
And these are all questions that are up in the air. And Courtney, once again, I can't thank you enough for the knowledge that you bring to us. But the fact that the president says that this main site was successfully hit, it could only be successfully destroyed by those ordinances that you are referring to. And in a way, they're not only bombs, they're actually almost like drill tips that are able to penetrate deep in the ground and then at a predetermined distance or depth detonate. Mm-hmm. What are the possibilities that any other ordinance could have been used?
This is a Fox News alert. News from the President of the United States that there has been an attack inside Iran. Just moments ago, President Donald Trump putting out on Truth Social, we have completed our very successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. All planes are now outside of Iran airspace. Again, this from President Donald Trump. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordow. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Again, that's just seconds ago from President Donald Trump on Truth Social, suggesting that those B-2 bombers that perhaps were on the way may have been behind this. We'll get more details on these 3 sites that the president said has been attacked inside Iran. This comes after days of negotiations to try to get Iran to the negotiating table. The President of the United States saying it would have to be unconditional surrender, saying enrichment would have to stop. We heard from negotiations in Europe that was not being accepted by the Iranians, that they would not stop enriching uranium. There was a thought that this could go as long as 2 weeks, as the president said he would decide within 2 weeks. However, 2 days is within 2 weeks. And now word from President Donald Trump that these attacks have happened. Again, interesting that 3 sites have been struck by U.S. bombers, and this again we'll get more information about the exact targets and what bombs were used. We expect that the GBU-57, the bunker buster, the massive penetrator bomb, may have been one of those used. Fordow is a nuclear facility inside Iran that is roughly a half-mile deep underneath a rock mountain-like facility that has been said to be the site of a lot of the enrichment capability. Esfahan, believed to be a storage facility for enriched uranium, and Natanz, another part of the nuclear facilities. They have several throughout Iran. It has been long described as a very difficult and tedious effort to go after these nuclear sites, but the U.S. for the first time launching an attack inside Iran. Again, the President of the United States saying all of the planes are out of Iranian airspace. The bombings do continue by the Israelis inside Iran as this back and forth volley between Israel and Iran has continued for some 2 weeks. We expect to hear more about this operation, not only from the Pentagon, but perhaps from the White House, although the White House this evening, has called a lid, as far as meaning no one will talk after that. That may be changing now. Obviously, we have this Truth Social post from President Donald Trump.
Welcome back to our continuous coverage on what is happening in the Iran-Israel war. And Donald Trump has just put out a message on his social media post saying that the United States has carried out airstrikes on all 3 nuclear sites in Iran. We'll get Donald Trump's social media post in just a bit, but this is what the American president is now announcing to the world, that the United States has carried out a very successful attack on the nuclear sites in Iran which includes the facilities of Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan. Remember, this was something that was being speculated upon even until a few minutes back. Donald Trump had just said only time will tell in his previous social media post just some moments back. But this is his latest social media post where he's now announcing airstrikes on 3 nuclear sites in Iran, which includes Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan. The American president further said that all planes are now outside the Iranian airspace. This is his precise social media post on Truth Social, and I quote him here: "We have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan. All planes are now outside of Iran's airspace. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site Fordow, and all planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter." So there are several important things that stand out here. He has said that the attack was successful. It has been completed, where 3 nuclear stations, nuclear facilities of Iran at Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan have been bombed by the Americans. He also went on to reiterate a full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary sites Fordow. All planes are now safely on their way home. Congratulations to our American warrior. There's not another military in the world that could have done this. And here is the critical part. Now is the time for peace, says Donald Trump, all in caps. So is it now time for peace, or is this just the beginning of America's involvement in what could potentially be a long drawn-out war on Iran along with the Israelis? And our correspondent Susan Tehrani, of course, is joining us with more updates on this. Susan, what's the latest on the story?
Well, Mohammed, as you noted, social media sites and news websites are blowing up with this post by President Donald Trump. The attack, it came on the 9th of that war between Israel and Iran. And there's no doubt that it could provoke retaliation from Tehran against U.S. troops and military installations across the region. We know that the U.S. military now conducted airstrikes on those nuclear facilities in Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Remember, Natanz also had an underground section that the Israelis had a very hard time getting to. This decision to intervene directly in support of Israel's effort to dismantle Iran's nuclear program really marks a historic escalation in the Middle East at this point. It's an intervention fraught with risk, uncertainty, but it's one that President Trump decided to do and reached the conclusion that it is now or never. We anticipated something was going to happen this weekend, considering the fact that the U.S. air carriers are already in the region right now, the Nimitz, the other ones, and also because President Trump yesterday cut his trip short from New Jersey, and we saw in his press statement that he sends out to the media, the White House sends out to the media, that he was going to meet with his national security team at the Oval Office at 6 p.m. local time in Washington, D.C. So once we knew that he's going to make this trip back, there was anticipation that something was going to happen. Something is going on.
Indeed, something was going on, because this is what Donald Trump had put out in his social media post a little while back, where when he was asked what will happen, he had said that only time will tell. And then half an hour, 1 hour later, he'd of course put out this social media post of his, confirming that the attack was a very successful one, which targeted 3 of the Iranian nuclear facilities of Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan. All planes are now outside the Iranian airspace. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site Fordow, and all planes are now safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There's not another military in the world that could have done this, and now is the time for peace, says the American president. Susan, there was a lot of speculation that was rife. There were these B-2 bombers that had taken off from the Missouri Air Base and were headed to Guam. A lot of people were saying that probably these could have been deployed for carrying out an attack, but that clearly looks like a decoy, because no one publicizes the manner in which these military assets are moved, expecting that they would be involved in the attack. At this moment, has any information come out yet as to how this attack was effected?
We're going to get more information. Right now, this is the initial news that we got from President Trump. Of course, he wanted to keep U.S. troops safe. He, as you mentioned, is really the master at not revealing his cards. Although we reported on WION, it was anticipated that that 2-week window that he gave just seems too far-fetched, considering the situation Iran and Israel were in right now and the urgency that Israel and the United States were displaying about Iran's nuclear capabilities. And so, we'll figure out soon enough, and we'll know soon enough what military equipment and bombers and aircraft were used. But I think it's very important to note that the United States was able to go over Iranian airspace the way that it did, the manner that it did, and possibly because the Iranians just simply don't control their airspace right now. It's under the control of Israel. And I think that's what made it, so undetectable and so possible so fast.
Right. Now, we need to, of course, see as to how the Iranians, of course, respond to this. They could respond in a number of different ways, saying that although the Americans claim that they've struck the sites, maybe they may not have suffered the damage to the extent that the Americans are claiming. Or the Iranians could, of course, respond militarily, because they've said that attacking their nuclear facilities is a clear red line, and any nation that aids the Israelis in the war they started with Operation Rising Lion will also become a legitimate target. So this is the United States of America jumping into this war in a very formal manner. The American president says that the airstrikes have been successful. 3 nuclear sites have been targeted, but there's something interesting that he's saying. Now is the time for peace. How are we to interpret this, Susan? Is this the American president now saying that, listen, we've carried out the attacks that we wanted to, and we don't want to fight anymore? What are we to make of this?
Perhaps, but I do want to say we're just getting word right now, Mohammed, and I think we'll get a better understanding of what he means and what direction the United States is going to move towards moving forward. He's expected to address the nation at 9 p.m. That's in about 15 minutes' time.
In about 16 minutes' time, we'll of course hear from the American president. We need to wait and watch and listen to what the American president now has to say, because we still do not know. This is a very precarious moment. This is a moment where everything stands on a knife's edge. It's difficult to predict as to how things will unfold from here. Remember, bombing nuclear facilities is never a good option to resort to, but this is what the American president says that the American military has done. And now we need to wait for the Iranian response. We also need to wait for the Israeli reaction. I'm pretty sure Benjamin Netanyahu, who had been exhorting Donald Trump to get involved, will have something to say on these. These are developments that are happening pretty thick and fast, and we need to wait and watch as to how things unfold.